The Claremont run is the longest consecutive author run on a Marvel Comics title in history. For 16 years, Chris Claremont steered the X-Men ship through a decade and a half of social and cultural context, and along the way, Claremont wove in a number of commentaries on mainstream media culture through the incorporation of parody in Uncanny X-Men. So what is parody? Oddly enough, it's a word that most of us seem to think we know, but it's not actually a clear-cut term with a fixed definition. In some iterations, parody has to ridicule another text. In others, it has to specifically imitate the style of another text, rather than, say, the content. In still others, parody is defined almost synonymously with the concept of homage. Without a sturdy consensus to build on, let's call parody a referential allusion to another work with comic undertones behind it. The referential component is easy to identify in the Claremont run, with characters and premises that read as clear analogues to popular cinema, such as Star Wars, The Terminator, The Man with the Golden Gun, and Westworld. These aren't really played for laughs, however, nor are staunchly serious allegories for apartheid South Africa or the rise of televangelist-based religious extremism, which we also find in the run. So again, not parody. Even Sim, a character that directly references Dave Sim's ongoing title, Cerebus the Aardvark, is hard to fold into a concept of parody, given the extreme seriousness that eventually defines that character. Occasionally, however, Claremont does find room to laugh. One such example would be the villain character Mojo, first introduced by Ann Nocenti and Art Adams in the Longshot miniseries, but brought in as an iconic UXM villain thereafter. Mojo allowed Claremont to parody his own industry through a mix of slapstick silly in terms of dialogue and nightmarish horror in terms of visuals, a testament to Art Adams' skill. Due to his surreal nature, he generally only appears in annuals and specials to protect tonal consistency and increase impact. The parodic aspect is established through several references to Marvel Comics production, as well as the presence on page of the X-Men creative teams, such as Claremont, the Simonsons, Art Adams, and Ann Nocenti in several instances. In the broad sense, Mojo is a symbol of the influence of corporate greed upon media in general, and Marvel Comics specifically. The villain is characterized as a faux artist. He's literally spineless, who will cross any moral boundary for the sake of ratings, marketing, and merchandising opportunities, thus reflecting a generalized perception of the effects of the modern comics business model upon comics storytelling. While the isolation of Mojo to annuals reflects a desire to silo parody to a traditionally less canonical venue, there were times in UXM proper when parody would make a direct appearance for the sake of comic relief. Never was that more necessary than in the wake of Inferno, the largest and arguably darkest crossover event in Claremont's X-Men. To follow that up, Claremont followed with a pair of parodic stories divided by gender. In UXM 244, titled Ladies' Night, the X-Women find their retail therapy experience rudely interrupted by the M-Squad, a highly parodic take on the Ghostbusters, who did appear quite briefly at the outset of Inferno, where they were seemingly murdered by a demonic elevator before returning to antagonize the X-Women in Ladies' Night. Then, one issue later in Men, illustrated by a young Rob Liefeld, Claremont parodies Claremont by introducing an alien invasion force featuring a weapon of mass destruction identified as the Gene Bomb, an obvious Jean Grey reference. When asked what it does, the engineer replies, quote, "It possesses the power to fatally disrupt any and all relationships, personal, professional, organic, inorganic, macro, micro, whatever, down to the most primally subatomic molecular networks. Her mere presence will dissolve the most loving bonds, prompt brother to slay brother, and boon companions to tear themselves apart." End quote. Metatextually, the Gene Bomb refers as well to Claremont's take on Jean Grey's resurrection, which Claremont opposed, and the bomb-like effect it had on all X-Men continuity becomes the subject of the parody. Other examples of parody in the run include Jubilee breaking the fourth wall, Dazzler negotiating a surreal interpretation of the Hollywood film industry, and before any of these, Kitty's Fairy Tale as a commentary on X-Men group dynamics. And all of this without even discussing Excalibur, a significantly more parodic X-Men spin-off, also written by Claremont. In terms of takeaway, Claremont demonstrated a good amount of self-awareness through these parodic portrayals, a willingness to let down his famous sense of self-seriousness and to interrogate the mass media with an emphasis on interrogating his own role within it. Parody isn't a particularly common element in the Claremont run, but when it does appear, it has an impact. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to learn more about the Claremont Run project, You can follow us on Twitter at ClaremontRun or visit us on the web at www.claremontrun.com.